Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be welcoming you back to the MCR 2030 webinar series. It is our great pleasure today to welcome our colleagues from Resilient City Networks and Urban Ocean and Ocean Conservancy, who will be sharing with us today about the Urban Ocean Program, a very interesting program that helps cities to utilize a circularity approach to address the plastic waste. And today, the session will be running for 90 minutes, and we have the Spanish interpretation available. So if you click the globe icon below, you can select Spanish as your language. We will also be recruiting the questions if you have any for the speakers via the Q&A box at the very bottom of the Zoom screen as well. So don't hesitate to drop any questions that you may have for the speakers. Now I would like to invite Sanjay Bhatia, the head of the Global Education and Training Institute of UNDRR here in Incheon, for the welcoming remarks. Over to you, Sanjay.
And welcome to all the participants, and a big thanks to the co-organizers, Resilient Cities Network, Ocean Conservancy, and Urban Ocean. As all of you know, or many of you might be knowing, this is part of the series of webinars that we have introduced under the Making Cities Resilient 2030, which is a global initiative building on the Making Cities Resilient campaign, which ran for 10 years. So the MCR 2030 is for the next 10 years, and looking at how to encourage and support cities to become more sustainable and to implement and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in parallel with the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. So this series you have been seeing for some time now and will continue. But today we have with us the partners to talk about the Urban Ocean Program, which would, and tools and applications which would be very much of use for cities and urban practitioners in trying to achieve more sustainable development. So with that, I welcome you all again, and hope you find this very useful and practical, and hand over to Mai.
Thank you, Sanjaya. And with us here, I would like to first introduce to you Saurabh Gaidhani. He is the lead of the program at the Resilient City Network, and he brings with him tons of experience on resilience and climate change. And he will be introducing to us to all the speakers and the program that we'll be hearing today. So over to you, Saurabh.
Thank you. Thank you, Mai. Thank you, Sanjaya. I'm very happy and very glad that we are doing this as part of our collaboration with UNDRR and the MCR 2030 initiative of UNDRR. I'm from Resilient Cities Network, the world's leading urban resilience network of practitioners. And today we will be presenting the case of the Urban Ocean Program. I'm very proud and glad that the Ocean Conservancy, which is our program partner, will be joining in presenting about the program. Miss Keri Browder, who is the city's project director at Ocean Conservancy, he will be presenting about the program and the objectives and the structure of the program. Keri has a breadth of experience ranging from circular economy to water and sanitations across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Happy to have you here, Keri. Second speaker today will be Miss Taylor Maddalene. Taylor is the PhD student at the University of Georgia and the graduate researcher at Jambeck Research Group or the New Materials Institute. and they are our core partners deployed for gap assessments in urban ocean cities. Taylor comes from National Geography, and she led some of the key work for National Geography before pursuing her PhD at the University of Georgia. Happy to have you, Taylor, as part of the panelists. And our third speaker is Associate Professor Wiwandari from Diponegoro University in Semarang. I know Buvivi, as we call her, from her role as Deputy Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Semarang. As part of the Urban Ocean program, Professor Vivi is working with the city of Semarang on deploying the tools on ground, and we will be hearing from her about the Semarang experience. Happy to have you as well, Buvivi. With that, I think I will quickly give everyone a quick rundown on Resilient Cities Network, and then I will hand it over to Keri to talk about the program. So as I said, Resilient Cities Network is the world's leading urban resilience network. We do bring together global knowledge, practice, partnerships, and funding to empower cities, with aim to arm our member cities and others to help them build safer, more equitable and sustainable future for all the residents. Our key target and our mission is to at least create impact for 50 million lives in our cities through technical assistance, and channelize at least $10 million in investments towards resilience projects directly. As a network, our predecessor was 100 Resilient Cities Network, and in today we are taking it forward into as a city-led, regionally driven, a partner-based and impact-focused organization which spans across 6 continents, 21 languages, and 41 countries. And hopefully some of the member cities have joined this session. These are some of the list of the member cities. We span across the length and breadth of the globe. And how, so, before that, I think as our credentials, I think we have raised over, as part of a predecessor organization, over $3 billion in implementing resilience project, help channelize how they govern and institutionalize resilience office. We have close to 83 chief resilience officers who have been institutionalized into the city councils, while 78% of our member cities have embedded resilience principles in their city plans, and over 77% of the cities have started self-funding in the office positions or the chief resilience office positions after the end of the initial grant period during the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative. As an organization which builds on that foundation from Rockefeller Foundation and Resilient Cities Initiative, we have come along with an approach of empowering the cities to create a responsible global network, to mobilize them through impact funds and programmatic partnerships like Urban Ocean Program, and mobilize our partners and funders to bridge the gap at the project preparations and the urban projects. We also target to implement these projects leveraging on the technical expertise within the partners, as well as build capacities in cities, is to further implement and scale the approaches we are bringing to our cities. And that's, as a nutshell, how we deliver that as a thematic area. How is usually the question, how you deliver resilience. And I think we specifically target our approach on 2 thematic pillars. One is climate resilience, and the other one is circularity. which further targets on waste management, food system and resilient infrastructure, and urban ocean program, and the tools of urban ocean program, which you will be hearing today, fall under the circularity pillar of resilient cities. The transversal or the cross-cutting teams of the organizations are resilient recovery, both in terms of health because of the COVID-19 challenges and the economic recovery. And the second one is equity and equity challenges in the region. I think you will hear more from the distinguished speakers on the Urban Ocean program. The only thing I will mention about the program, it spans across 11 of our member cities currently, will run up to the Q1 of 2022, and we are hoping to bring at least 6 projects which will be implemented through this program and linked to funding for implementation. And this is sort of linked to some of the tools and the trainings which we have developed. You will be hearing from Professor Vivi about one of that tool and how we are deploying that tool on ground. And you can go and refer on our website some of the toolkit which we have prepared for resilient recovery. And if you have any interest on using them further in your cities or in organizations, you can feel free to reach out to me. I think as part of the organizations, we have developed close to 82 resilience strategies and around sort of targeted impact-driven projects. One of those is in Wellington, New Zealand, which reaches close to 400,000 citizens in Wellington by deploying 22 community water centers, which will be activated at the time of disaster, in this scenario, in time of earthquakes, and provide every citizens in those neighborhood with portable water, a 20-liter of portable water per person, and can safeguard cities for 100 days after the earthquake and the cascading effect of infrastructure. And similarly, in Rotterdam, we have created one of the first resilient neighborhoods, which impacts close to 1,500 of inhabitants and have sort of involved at least more than 150 community organizations in an integrated manner, with allocation of close to 5 million euros for the 5 years for the neighborhood. These are just some of the examples, and with that, you will be hearing from distinguished speakers on the link between the resilient and the sustainable and resilient waste management infrastructure and its link to creating healthy, clean, and prosperous cities, as well as oceans. With that, I will hand it over to Keri.
Good morning, buenos dias. It's a pleasure to be joining you all here from muggy Washington, DC. I hope you all are staying healthy and hope we can meet in person someday soon. Thank you, Saurabh, for the introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Keri, and I'm the city's project director at Ocean Conservancy. My primary focus is advancing circular economy, increasing community resilience, and reducing marine plastic through the Urban Ocean program. While the exact picture might not be familiar to you, we've all witnessed the pervasiveness of plastics in our environment. We all contribute to this problem, and together we can be part of the solution. Our hope through the Urban Ocean Partnership is to create clean, healthy cities for clean, healthy seas. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next slides are perfect, thank you. While there are much more startling images out there of marine life choked by various types of ocean plastic, back one, please. The reality is that our production, consumption, and waste has become commonplace in the ecosystem, and it is not equipped to manage it. Sorry, next. Next slide, please, Saurabh. Perfect. Thanks to Dr. Jenna Jambeck's work and the work of her team and the growing interest of the science community at large, we are starting to understand the scale of the problem. In 2015, Ocean Conservancy began collaborating with Dr. Jenna Jambeck, the New Materials Institute, to devise a solution to this growing issue. You'll see now that we are aware that at least 11 million metric tons of plastic waste are entering our ocean every year, and 80% of that plastic comes from land-based sources. It is our opportunity to figure out how we can solve this problem, not only to help ourselves and our communities, but to help our environment and our world at large. 20% originates from ocean-based sources like fisheries and vessels. So that's where you hear about ghost gear capturing wildlife after its use. And 1.3 billion is lost in annual revenues to tourism, fishing, and shipping industries as a result of this growing problem. So not only are we doing this for the environment's sake, but we're also doing this for the economy's sake and the economies that we depend on. If unabated, ocean plastic will reach at least 250 million tons by 2025, which is why the need is beyond urgent. Next, Saurabh. As you can see here, we are quite literally dealing with mountains of trash that impacts countless communities that live outside of its impacts in our shared marine environment. One critical portion of our program, as we will explain, is how do we create inclusive circular economy solutions that don't leave behind the communities that work within the waste stream. So informal sector workers, for instance. So when we were dealt with this challenge, we had to ask ourselves, how could we tackle such a complex problem? What are the methods that could deliver success, and who is equipped to lead this movement? Moreover, with the issues presented to us by COVID-19, how can we adapt to be more resilient in the face of stressors that we'll continue to face as the years go on? Next, please. The solution we decided was to engage local governments. Under the direction of Susan Rufo, our leadership at the time, cities emerged as the linchpin to catalyze this change. We realized that the only way to tackle such a complex and growing problem was to create complex solutions through cities and circular economy. Cities understand the context and the importance of realizing several what we call co-benefits for their communities. And enabling circular economy within cities will not only address the waste issues that plague our environments, provide resilience benefits such as increased jobs, investment, and more sustainable infrastructure. Next, please. So from there, Urban Ocean was born. We started in 2020, originally launching in 2019, but launched our first cohort of cities last year. And despite the COVID-19 pandemic, all of our cities said they still wanted to continue this important mission. There is a need and an opportunity to make circular economy tangible and real, and cities are well positioned to do that. Cities' priorities, such as economic development and creating jobs, as we discussed, are all required in creating a circular economy. The city, civil society, and private sector efforts will have more impact if they are aligned. So even despite the complexity of the challenge, we feel that through our partnerships with cities and through our organizations, Ocean Conservancy, Resilient Cities Network, and our partner, the UGA New Materials Institute, as well as the Circulate initiative, will be able to deliver the science-based solutions and opportunities that cities can pursue to then bring these solutions to scale, not only within their own regions, but in the world at large. Next. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as of right now, we have 11 cities across Southeast Asia and Latin America. The program will go on for about 20-ish months. We're hoping to finalize in February with this first cohort. And we will have 6 projects that will be launched in what we are calling our learning cities, which I will address a little bit later. The program in itself is simple. The idea is to build a coalition and a community of practice of cities that are committed to solving these interrelated issues around waste, resilience, circular economy, and plastic. First and foremost, the most important thing is to assess the situation through our partnership with the University of Georgia New Materials Institute. We are putting together, or they are implementing the Circularity Assessment Protocol, which is 1 pillar in a 2-pillar gap assessment, the second being the Opportunities Assessment Tool, which is implemented by the Resilient Cities Network. Once we have a comprehensive understanding of the specific situation in that city, they're more prepared to create tailored solutions to address those, which we hope to share along a greater community of practice so other cities can learn and grow as well. We will be developing project strategies and solutions and proposals for presentations to potential partners and funders in order to support this work on the ground moving forward. And this will also create a greater platform and hopefully more momentum to scale these approaches globally. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our makeup as of today. We have our learning cities listed on the left-hand side. They're the ones who are participating in the gap assessment. We also have mentor cities, which have a little bit more experience in implementing circular economy approaches, which will be shepherding our cities through their project preparation phase. We collaborate not only with University of Georgia's New Materials Institute and the Circulytics Lab, but also local implementation partners. We really want to stress this because I think that this was a good and profound adaptation of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Rather than being able to travel and implement the gap assessment in person, we were able to work through local partners, primarily through local universities selected by the city. Not only does this create partnerships that will hopefully last well into the future, but it also means that the cities and the universities can take even more ownership over managing the solutions that we find. Next slide, please. Right now, we're about 2/3 of the way through the program for the first cohort. We are finishing up the gap assessments. All of the circularity assessment protocols, as Taylor will speak to next, have been completed. The Resilient Cities Network is hard at work collaborating with the cities to best understand and prioritize which opportunities will present the most resilience benefits for the city. There'll be the project preparation phase and what we're calling the Accelerator Summit, where we present those projects in front of potential partners and funders. And from March 2022 onwards, we hope to put in place a second cohort that will expand even further into Latin America, as well into India. Next slide, please. To better understand the gap assessment, like I said, there are 2 pillars implemented by 2 different partners. The first being the Circularity Assessment Protocol. You can see here that it starts off by working with the local implementation partner. There is a process that is facilitated on the ground in person to understand the waste stream challenges as well as the opportunities that exist in that particular city. One reason why I am a huge advocate for the Circularity Assessment Protocol is that it's replicable in different cities across the globe, no matter if you're in an emerging or a more developed economy. And the metrics and the science that it provides can be used again to go back years later to see if you have improved and to prove measurable results, which I think is really critical for this type of work. The Resilient Cities Network worked very hard to adapt what they called their Systems Studio, which was delivered in person, to the Opportunities Assessment Tool, in which they work with the cities directly, as well as other interested parties working within the city and technical experts to devise what are the most important priorities to the city, what is feasible to implement, and what will provide the most resilience co-benefits, not only for waste management and the community, but the ocean as well. And I will pass it on to the next, please. I know we only have so much time to discuss here today, but please feel free to, I'll leave my information in the chat. Please feel free to contact me if you have any more questions about the program or the partnership. And I am excited to hand it over to Saurabh and Taylor to go into the CAP in more detail. Thank you.
Taylor, you can start, Taylor.
Great. Thanks for passing it over, Keri. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. It's great to see that we've got participants from all over the globe today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all a bit more about the Circularity Assessment Protocol that we run through the University of Georgia and have been doing in partnership with Urban Ocean over the last almost a year now. I guess about a year. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. All right. Excellent. So Keri did a fantastic job of giving an overview of the full scope of the Urban Ocean program. And I'm going to be speaking specifically about the Circularity Assessment Protocol, which is part of the gap assessment that all of the cities are required to do, essentially to set a baseline from which to work as part of the Urban Ocean program. Very briefly, I just wanted to introduce you to our research group. So we are headed by distinguished Professor Dr. Jenna Jambeck here at the University of Georgia, who also helped to found the New Materials Institute and now the Circularity Informatics Lab, which is where we are based. We have a series of PhD students, master's students, and undergraduate students, as well as other research engineers that support our work. And along with several other initiatives that we have going on, one of our major deliverables is conducting the Circularity Assessment Protocol in cities around the world to measure circular materials management and to co-develop solutions with cities. For a bit of brief context, which I realized with this group and especially with these previous speakers, I did not need to harp on, but this was a body of research that was conducted by Jenna Jambeck and several others back in 2017, essentially identifying that we're really developing a problem of scale when it comes to our waste, and particularly our plastic waste, as that is the non-biodegradable, really persistent type of waste, and is often also the waste that is difficult to capture, has low value, and there is not, necessarily an established market for. So this body of research essentially identified that over or around 80% of waste was ending up in landfill, either sanitary or otherwise. And a very small amount was getting recycled, a small amount was getting incinerated. And with the projections that were going forward, it was really a wake-up call, I think. This paper really led to a lot of exciting initiatives that realized that this was an issue that we could no longer ignore and was going to continue to present a problem. And so our research group really focuses on solid waste management. Our backgrounds are largely in environmental engineering, but we also have anthropologists, we have ecologists, we have a wide range of specialties that we work with essentially to tackle this problem from a waste management and circular materials management perspective. So this is a framework that Dr. Jambeck essentially presented as part of a US Senate testimony in 2016. And this was really thinking about circularity as a framework with multiple different intervention points. And what I always say is one of the extremely it can be frustrating, but also I think immensely exciting things about tackling plastic pollution and waste management is that there is no one silver bullet. There are multiple different points for solutions, multiple different intervention points, and none of those things can operate in a vacuum. They really all do work together. And so it's sort of an exciting systems challenge when we look at these issues to figure out how we can optimize a city's circular materials management, which in turn, as I think you're coming to appreciate as part of this presentation, enhances the resilience and overall sustainability of that city. So in order to quantify that circularity stream, we, back in 2019, developed something called the Circularity Assessment Protocol, or the CAP. And essentially, this is a hub and spoke model that provides a snapshot of a city's circularity and can provide data for action. So there are 7 different components in which we collect both qualitative and quantitative data, ranging all the way from the input of material into a system through to how it is used, how it is disposed, and ultimately what ends up escaping that waste process. And I should mention that typically we do the CAP specifically around single-use plastic items and especially plastic packaging, but it's really something that can be done to look at any type of material in a given system. And we also collect data, as you'll see later, on not only plastic, but other materials that are existing in the system. So it really is a versatile tool. To date, we have conducted the CAP in 26 cities across 10 countries. And as Keri outlined very well, we're increasing that by another 6 cities through the first cohort of the Urban Ocean program. And we are planning several more after that. So it's an exciting time for the CAP, and we're setting a lot of great baselines of data from which we can build. And ultimately, the idea with the CAP is that this data then belongs to the city and belongs to the partners that we're working with so that they can make the best decisions and implement the most effective interventions going forward. So I want to just briefly chat about some of these specific questions that are answered for each of those components. So as you'll see, there's input, community, product design, use, collection, end of cycle, and leakage. And these are essentially the questions that we're getting at. And we collect a wide range of data. So we collect both qualitative data through stakeholder interviews, observational data. We take a lot of photographs in the field. But we also collect hard data in terms of what are the top brands, what are the top items that are ending up in stores across top categories such as chips, beverages, candy. What are the infrastructures that are in place in terms of reuse schemes or refill schemes? Are there innovations, particularly around packaging within the city? Then we'll look at waste collection structures as well as end of cycle. And we call it end of cycle instead of end of life intentionally because we are focused on circularity. And so hopefully that product ultimately gets repurposed in some way. So this is looking at not only landfill, but also recycling, incineration, compost, and what the composition of that waste looks like. And what leakage represents is essentially what is escaping that system that's in place. And what we're trying to answer there is what ends up in the environment, how did it get there, and how do you prevent it from getting there in the first place? So as Keri and Saurabh both outlined, the Urban Ocean program is starting with its first cohort of now 6 cities across the world. And as part of that, one of the silver linings of COVID is that our team, obviously is not able to travel to collect this data. So we've been working with some amazing local implementing partners in each of that city, including Dr. Wiwandari from the Diponegoro University. So one of the great tools of this protocol is that we're able to put the data collection capacity and then in turn the sort of monitoring and solution capacity directly in the hands of the city and the local partners that can continue to track those metrics over time. So just some quick numbers. We have conducted the CAP in 5 cities and through 5 local implementing partners to date. We have the 6th coming soon, which we're very excited about. We've collected nearly 25,000 or documented nearly 25,000 litter items across all of those cities. Over 1,000 convenience store products or grocery store products have been sampled. 366 to-go items, so that includes single-use cutlery, plates, other things that are disposable. 128 stakeholder interviews have been conducted, and 118 restaurants and food vendors have been sampled. And now to a quick overview of some of the data that we're seeing across all of the cities. I should mention that we're planning in late August to do a full presentation of all of the data that we've collected across the first cohort of cities to date. So we're happy to share information on that, and we'd love for anyone who is interested to tune into that to learn more. But very briefly, I wanted to just show essentially some of the litter data that we've collected, because that's all available on our marine debris tracker website. So we collect this data through a free open source app that our research team developed. You can log on to the website anytime and look at the data real time. I highly encourage you to go see if there is any litter data available in your country or your city. And so this essentially shows the quantity of the litter items collected proportional to the size of the pie chart, and then as well as a rough breakdown of some of the top items that we're seeing. So as you'll see, food, plastic, and tobacco products are among the top materials that we identify in litters across all of the cities. Interestingly, except for Panama City, where we also saw that plastic fragments were the second most common material. You can also see relatively high percentages of paper litter for each city, as well as unique cases such as organic waste that we can see in Pune and Semarang, and high amounts of metal waste in Panama City as well. So again, one of the more qualitative data collections that we do is actually characterizing the litter that's escaping the waste stream, and then determining why it's ending up there and how we prevent it from entering the environment in the first place. This is a sort of breakdown of all of the litter material composition from all of the cities. So again, majority food plastic and tobacco products. And the food plastic is largely film material or multi-layer plastic, such as chip bags, candy bags, and things, which are lightweight, often have very little to no value in the waste stream, and are difficult to collect and capture. Tobacco products, largely we saw cigarettes, and also different types of tobacco product packaging, from sachets to cartons and otherwise. This histogram essentially shows you the distribution of the litter densities across all of the transects. So for each of the urban ocean cities, they would walk 27 litter transects throughout the city. And those were 9 transects within 3 different groups of population count. So we use ambient population instead of population density, because this essentially shows the activity within an area and not necessarily just the residents living there. But you can see that the majority of the transects are really in a fairly low litter density, but we do get the occasional high ones that pop up. And it's interesting to sort of layer on why that is the case and where we see that. And one of the ways that we further analyze this is by breaking it down based on that population count. So one of the things that is really interesting to see here is that more activity and more people doesn't necessarily always translate to more litter, which is often the hypothesis going into these. And similarly, we can see that less people does not always translate to less litter. For example, we can see in Kanta that the lower population actually had lower litter than some of the higher population count areas, and similarly with Malacca. And so what we do is look at some of these compounding variables in these situations. And what we're measuring is the active waste leakage areas as opposed to environmental sinks or reservoirs. So this is waste that we know is ending up there fairly recently, is going to continue to end up there. And it's a really interesting way to look at these litter densities and think about why that is the case. This is just a snapshot of some of the top items that we saw. So some of those earlier pie charts were the materials. This is really what the top 5 litter items that we saw in each of the 5 initial cities. It's really striking, I think, to see some of the similarities across these Southeast Asian countries across the top. You can see that their first, second, and fourth item were all the same. So cigarettes, plastic food wrappers, and straws. It's also interesting to see some of the unique items. For example, tobacco sachets were the #1 item that we saw in Pune. But that specific product doesn't necessarily exist or does not exist in that quantity in some of the other cities, versus things like cardboard and plastic cigarette cartons that we saw in other places. So there's an interesting sort of cultural and community layer that we can put on to better understand why some of these items are ending up here. Another interesting observation is that, as we were just saying with the Southeast Asian cities, cigarettes and plastic food wrappers were in the top 5 litter items across all of the 5 cities that we saw consistently. I think it's a ubiquitous litter item that we see, which is promising in that it provides an opportunity to have a conversation about extended producer responsibility, production, bring in some brands, and think more concretely about how you can either use alternatives or create value for some of those items that we know are escaping the waste stream. Also notable among the top 10 litter items in all but 1 city for each of these were straws, hard plastic fragments, and paper. So just another interesting note about some of the top items that we see in terms of litter across all of these places. With the last minute left, I wanted to just do a brief overview. And again, we're holding an event later in August to dive into some of these things in more detail after we've had some more time to analyze the data. But we can very clearly see that there are some consistent and common challenges across all of these cities, even across continents and across countries. For example, as you can see from the litter items, the top convenience items are largely made of these multi-layer plastic films that are very difficult to collect and capture, and often have little to no value in the recycling market. It would also be really beneficial, and we heard from a lot of the stakeholder conversations that they are very keen to have targeted solutions specifically for some of those most problematic items, including reduction alternatives and adding value to those products. Cost effectiveness and availability and convenience were consistently cited as some of the top both supportive and hampering issues related to using single-use plastics versus others. So single-use plastic items were especially for to-go products such as cutlery, plates, food, and especially during this time of a global pandemic where these are, the most common way that people are getting food in some places, are consistently cheaper and more readily available than alternatives, which is sort of an interesting systematic challenge to deal with. There was also consistent demand for programs that would get young and tech-savvy individuals into the waste sector and sort of rejuvenate a lot of those jobs in those areas and those sectors within those cities, and especially for new technologies and innovations that could sort of launch those programs. Space, capacity, technology, and manpower were both for existing waste collection and management infrastructure as well as for new and incoming infrastructure were constantly cited as a challenge across all of the cities. Not surprisingly, and it's something that on a very optimistic note, all of the cities seem very keen to address, and there are many structures in place to address that, which leads me to our next and last slide that I want to leave you with on a hopeful note is that there were also similarly some common strengths across all of the cities that we've identified so far for the first cohort. One of them, very excitingly, is that a lot of the manufacturing and parent companies for top convenience items that we saw were located either within the city, within the country, or within, say 1,000 kilometers or so of the stores themselves. So there are a lot of opportunities for EPR. And this is something that I think is fairly unique, because if you think about places like in the US and where I'm based, a lot of our products are being imported from far-flung places around the globe, and it can be much more difficult to think about extended producer responsibility. We also saw so many cases of innovations within the city to maximize collection. For example, there were some great examples of collaborations between formal and informal waste sectors, basically kind of shining a light on some of these opportunities to enhance collection. And there were also consistently small but really enthusiastic groups that support refill and reuse stations, bulk stores, alternatives. Every city that we went to, there was overwhelmingly some case, even if it's small, of people that have some wonderful ideas and are really supportive of positive change. Similarly, it was consistently cited that there was an energized younger generation that really wants to tackle some of these problems. And I think a lot of that is due to things like enhanced education, social media outreach. They're very fired up. There were also some great historical contexts and cases around reusables and alternatives. In a lot of these places, a lot of these cities, single-use plastic has not been around for hundreds of years like some of the other products. And so the older generations are very familiar with other products and ways of delivering products that was more sustainable. And so there could be opportunities to return to that. Consistently as well, there were national or regional policies, strategies, and frameworks in place, even if they were implemented at different levels. I think, as we were mentioning earlier with some of the research that has come out since around 2017, a lot of cities and countries are looking to put tangible policies in place and tangible targets and goals in place for cities to work up to and sort of fold into, which is really promising. Again, just in terms of interest from community awareness, there was a lot of interest for campaigns that inform the community on how to properly sort and handle waste according to protocols, especially for source segregation of waste. And interestingly, there were a lot of cases of cities where there was a high amount of organic waste in the waste stream. And almost all of the cities are in some stage of working towards source segregation, even if it's just wet and dry waste, which can be extremely helpful for waste management and sorting and effectively increasing circularity later on in the stream. So with that, I wanted to thank you all for taking the time. I hope that this was an insightful and interesting overview to some of the work that we've been doing with our circularity assessment protocol for urban ocean. Again, we will keep you all updated. We're happy to share information on our seminar that's planned for later this summer related to the findings from the circularity assessment protocol for urban ocean. And we're excited to continue this collaboration with Resilient Cities Network and with Ocean Conservancy and the Circulate Initiative. And thank you for the opportunity. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Wiwandari from Diponegoro University to speak more about the capital implementation in Semarang, Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Taylor, for giving me the opportunity to share experience from Semarang. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody here. And I would like to continue the program about urban ocean, how we try to implement as the local implementing partners in Semarang. So I'm here actually act as the local implementing partner. Saurabh has introduced me first. I am associate professor at the Diponegoro University, but also since 2013, I've been engaged as part of the Semarang City Resilience Team. And I'm so happy that Semarang was chosen as the one of the city for the first cohort to implement these tools that I would like to share to you this evening from Indonesia. For those of you who have not really familiar with Semarang, Semarang is one of the metropolitan city in Java Island, the densest island in Indonesia, with more or less 1.8 million inhabitants. So it is a metropolitan city, quite dense, and of course the city has important issues related to waste management. As has been explained earlier, what I would like to share in this opportunity is actually the Semarang experience on implementing the gap assessment that has been happening since last September. And there are two approaches, basically. Call it as the City Circularity Assessment Protocol, or CAP, and the Opportunity Assessment Tools, or OATs. sometimes I'm also confused with this abbreviation, yeah, but that's what I would like to share to you all based on the Semarang experience, the CAP and the OAT, and the way we as the local implementing partners has a very good collaboration with the University of Georgia and also with the Resilient Cities Network. And I'm happy that one of actually the important success factor is the way we develop a good communication among different partners. Yeah, there are actually 4 main activities that we have been done so far up to let's say end of June. We have complete what we call as the CAP or Security Assessment Protocol. Taylor has explained all the process, and we also have complete what we call as 3 series of workshop as the continuation of based on the result of the CAP. We call it as the framing workshop, participatory workshop, and solutioning workshop. And yeah, I hope I can manage the time to briefly explain how the process so far take place in Semarang. Within the Circularity Assessment Protocol or CAP, in Semarang, we chose 9 points. Yeah, we call it as 9 transects. Each transect are within 1 kilometer square wide, and we choose these 9 transect based on the density and the variety of the activity. So there are low, medium, and high with various types of urban activities. Some might be focused on residential, while others focus on more into the commercial area, for example. And there are also sampling on 3 points in each transect. And the surveyor need to walk about 100 meters, and we use the marine debris application and measuring all by using wheels, yeah, during the survey. And yeah, this is more or less the way we did in Semarang using the marine debris tracker. And as you can see from the slide, there are about 11,000 yeah, debris has been counted, and based on about 700 and 600 collection events. And I think this debris tracker gives a very interesting experience for the local stakeholders, not only for the surveyor, but this kind of tools is very interesting to introduce the importance of awareness on the plastic waste, basically for the local stakeholder in Semarang. So this is more or less the way we can see the litter densities among samplings area. There are various types based on the density and also the area average litter density. So of course, this is all based on the use of the marine debris tracker. In combination, despite the use of the tracker, we also did some interviews with shop, the grocery shop within the area. And we also asked our surveyor to collect and buy the top products. And the top products are the candies, tobacco, and snack or chips, just like what Taylor has mentioned before. And we also find materials that are often used by traders, just like plastic, cups, styrofoam, and so on. And we also combine the types of shop from formal supermarket, but also informal shop or people who sell food in informal sector to provide or to deliver some interview to them. Beside the interview, we also weighing the reps. As you can see here, materials and product waste identification, and we also try to find where they are produced. So we to know the way the circularity takes place in Semarang city. And beside the interview to the respondent in the area, to the shop, to the seller, food seller, and so on, we also did a stakeholder interview. We work mostly with the Chief Resilience Officer of Semarang City, and we make a kind of simple stakeholder mapping and to identify and to make an interview with all related stakeholders. Mostly they are the NGO who are actively engaged in waste management, and also with some local champions who has been working a lot in waste bank, waste collectors, and also representative from government, to enrich our interview directly from the shop sellers in our Transect area. And this is more or less, if Taylor has mentioned the comparison among 5 cities, this is the way I can share to you all the result from Semarang. For example, this is the average weight of products and their plastic packaging. As you can see, we did it as part of the survey activities. And we also check the parent company and check the distance for the main products. Mostly they are candy, chips, drinks, tobacco, and wafer or biscuits. And we can see here the average length store to parent company and length store to the manufacturer to fulfill all the required data that we need to further work with these CAP tools. As also already mentioned earlier, the material is mostly the types of the plastics, followed by paper, wood, and other, but mostly plastic is the most top waste that we can check from the result of the survey. Briefly talk about the key findings. As you can see on the slide, from the input, based on the data that has been collected, we know that the majority of the top consumer is actually from manufacturers within Southeast Asia. Some of them even within in the country, in Indonesia. And in terms of the community, I think one of the interesting findings is related to the perception. So the literacy and awareness, I think it's interesting and indeed important issues when we talk about the way community understand about plastic, about waste and plastic waste in the area. Focusing on the product design, we find out that the majority of the product packaging is our single-use plastic, largely made of materials that is difficult to capture in the waste stream, as already also mentioned by Taylor. And the use of those waste is actually, some stores may offer paper bag alternative, but most also offer single layer film plastic bags, and some need to give charge about 30 cents US dollar or 3,800 Indonesian rupiah. And even though at the moment the local government promote not to use single plastic bags, and I think so far it has been progressing, the policy implementation. Regarding the collection, one interesting finding based on our interview with the local stakeholders is the way the community initiative working, some with the help of the local government, some they develop themselves, is what we call as the waste bank. So we see that the waste bank show promise, in increasing the collection and capture of waste in the waste stream. We found a lot of challenges in the part of the end of the cycle issues, such as segregation, transportation, and lack of technology pose a great challenge to the waste management sectors. And it is then followed up mostly in the next year when we are working on the OAT, the Opportunity Assessment Tools. And another interesting findings when we talk about the leakage is, as also already mentioned by Taylor, tobacco products and single-use plastic food packaging were the dominant litter items. And even they were among the top 5 litter items found in most population density area. And interestingly, I just find out that it's not only in Semarang, but also in other cities in the first cohort for the urban ocean program. Little bit talking about, that is about the CAP, and based on the result of the CAP, we start what we call as the opportunity assessment tools. There are 3 workshops that we already finished. And we start with a framing session with the very intensive collaboration with the Resilient Cities Network with Saurabh and the team. And we invite some selected participants, the CRO, us as the local implementing partners, the local government, and also important local stakeholders. A small group, only about 6 persons, and we have an intensive discussion and end up with 3 initial opportunities. They are enhancing cities 3R, reduce, reuse, recycle campaign, and then increasing waste collection capacity and financing waste circularity. So we basically end up with this initial opportunity, not only based on the CAP findings, but also in combination with some inputs from the local government and also local stakeholders. Based on the framing session, we start the second workshop. We call it as the participatory workshop. The tools very much supported by the DRC and teams. And luckily at that time, we can do it offline because in May, the situation of the COVID pandemic in Indonesia is relatively conducive compared to the current situation. Luckily, we did it on May, and if we need to do it now, then we need to do it online. But luckily, we can do it offline, and it makes a more intensive discussion, and we invite broader audience, not only the small audience that we have in our first workshop, more or less 20 people divided into 3 groups. There are government, academia, NGO, private sectors, and community group. And we as the local implementing partners work to facilitate the discussion. And each group end up with kind of priorities based on the theme that we resulted from the first workshop. For example, in the 3R from the first group, we end up with 3 proposed action: raising awareness, collaboration with industry, and policy regulation. And then the second group, focusing on the waste collection capacity. There are 4 proposed action: punishment and reward, related to regulation, transportation subsidy, and so on. And from the last group, focusing on the financing, waste circularity, there are 4 proposed action as well. And this is a kind of more detailed elaboration that we already got from the first workshop. And we just complete our last workshop in the 28th of June, about a week ago, and we did it online again with a smaller group, not like the second workshop where we invite bigger group representing different stakeholders. In the third workshop, we invite smaller groups, more or less same representative with the first workshop, with the objective to to detail the potential opportunities of the city that have been developed in the second workshop. And we use online tools, Miro, to develop the work. And we are very happy that the Resilient Cities Network team, Saurabh and Maddalene, helped us with this workshop. We worked together and end up with some opportunity statements. We categorize the statements into 5 themes. And the big themes is about the adaptive waste management models and inclusive waste governance. There are 5 opportunity statements theme, related to study, campaign, related to because of the raising awareness, and then the program, how to engage CSR engagement, and so on, and then also themes related with the governance, regulation, and then also the 5th is we end up with the theme related to the project that is related to the review and upgradation of the waste bank and the 3R approach. In Bahasa we call this TPS 3R. And to end my presentation this evening from Indonesia, I would like to highlight 5 notes that I would like to share to you all based on our experience in delivering the CAP and OAT as the local implementing partners from Semarang City. The first is I personally believe that these tools provide a very good baseline and strong evidence that may help the local government and also all involved stakeholders to have more confidence to continue with the waste management issues in the city. Indeed, it is also very important to have a very inclusive process since the beginning. So this interview with the local shop, with the local stakeholders is very important part, and it is also need to be supported by a good stakeholder mapping. And at the same time, I believe this process may regard as a good approach to also improve the capacity of the local stakeholders, raising awareness, and so on. And also, simultaneously, it can strengthen the network among the related institutions, not only within the city Semarang, but also at the national level, because in some of the workshop, we also invite stakeholders outside Semarang, for example. So to end my slide, it takes time, but worth it. So I hope we can continue and end up with a good result by the beginning of next year, and hope we can contribute as the one of cities in the first cohort in Urban Ocean program. Thank you. I will stop here and give the time, maybe continue to, I don't know.
Thank you, Bu Vivi. Thank you, Taylor and Keri. We did good on time. So we have finished with 5 minutes under. On questions, I think there was one, there was a participant who had raised his hand, but I no longer see him or her live. So, but there is a question from participants, maybe more targeted, Taylor, to you. Since the CAP is also usable by landlocked cities or cities, let's say, along the rivers rather than coastal areas, if any of these cities are interested to apply this circularity assessment protocol to improve solid waste management in general, and who can they approach for more information and collaboration?
That's a great question, and I'm glad to hear if there are cities that are interested in using this work. You're absolutely right in that we've used the CAP in cities that are not necessarily coastal. It certainly can be done in landlocked places. Everything ultimately flows somewhere, so there's definitely ways that we can implement that. I dropped in the chat the website for our Circularity Informatics Lab, which is the research group where our work is housed. You can also reach out to me directly. I can drop my information in here. We're always looking for additional places where we can do this work, and we'd be happy to run the CAP in other places especially if there's opportunities to do sort of, regional approaches, or as Urban Ocean has been doing, sort of connecting cities so that they can learn from each other. The more data that we can collect, we're engineers, so the more data, the better.
Yeah. And I think, and that's a larger, I think one more question, and we did answer that in the live chat, but maybe more both to you and Keri, is about the use of alternatives. Yes, I think there are limited options of alternatives, or eco-friendly alternatives for plastics. But then what's the case for alternatives? One. And second is on tobacco use, where we can see from all the 5 cities where tobacco is in top 5, if not in top 2. And what and how an alternative will look in that scenario. So maybe first, Keri, to you on alternatives, and Taylor, you can respond after that.
Sure. So to answer the first question, I think Taylor can talk in more detail about the science around alternative solutions. But one thing that I know that I've seen through my work is that not all alternatives are necessarily better for the planet, even though they market themselves as such. And so while the science is still out on alternatives, we need integrated approaches that say, if you provide this alternative, what is the end life? What is the waste management solution for that alternative? Because if it still ends up in a landfill and it needs special treatment in order to be eco-friendly and dissolved, then it actually isn't doing the environment any better. And I think even as a consumer, it's very confusing when you think that something has, in our case, like a green recycling sign on it or some sort of planet symbol on it, and you think it's better for the planet when it isn't necessarily, because the regulation around the marketing isn't there. So I think there needs to be more approaches working with local governments to regulate what can be an alternative, and then also make sure that a waste management solution is in place before those alternatives are really pushed to consumers. Because after that, it's really hard to, we have a saying that says, put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's hard to stop the train when it's already moving. So we need to be much more strategic moving forward before we start pushing these alternative solutions. And then as far as tobacco products go, there have been some programs out there that we've seen that have worked in curbing plastic waste. I can try to find some and put them in the chat, but basically engaging the community to be aware that there is plastic in a cigarette. So the filter itself is plastic. So if you smoke and then you just dispose of the filter in the streets, it eventually ends up in your waste streams, the water, the ocean. And so there are outreach examples that we've seen in cities specifically to collect that waste, some fun alternatives I've seen around the world. And then there is a market being developed by waste managers specifically to tackle this type of waste. I included in the chat that I hope that we can actually get more research and development on how there could be alternatives to plastic filters, or how we can better dispose of this waste and create maybe an EPR scheme with waste producers or tobacco waste producers. And I'm happy to have the conversation a bit longer, but that is my long-winded answer. Taylor, take it away.
No, I think you covered it perfectly, Keri. You hit all of the points that I would have hit, especially in terms of the first question. We're looking at this at a systems level. And so one of the things that we think about most commonly with alternatives is exactly as Keri said, what is the ultimate end of cycle of that product? And one of the most pertinent cases that we've seen is one of the cities that we were working in, around 50%, or I think almost over 50% of the grocery bags that were being used were a material called PLA, which is advertised as compostable. But there was no industrial composting units available within the city boundaries, certainly, and I think even within sort of the country boundaries. So one of the things to take into consideration, exactly as Keri said, is alternatives can be a wonderful option as long as the infrastructure is in place to handle them properly. Another just quick point that I wanted to make is that, you know, ultimately, I think that especially when it comes to single-use products, our first line of defense should really be, are there things that we don't need to use? Are there opportunities for elimination of products entirely? It's not always the best option to switch to an alternative if there are ways that you could potentially eliminate a certain product or packaging type entirely. And just, I know I said that was the last point, but I just thought of another, is that in a lot of places, I think I mentioned the sort of historical context of alternatives. In a lot of places that we visited, there are alternatives that aren't necessarily more modern types of polymers, but really just previous ways that people used to do things. I mean, a great case in the United States is sort of the milkman glass refillable bottles that people used to use for milk delivery. And so and many people are still familiar with those mechanisms. They're not that old. So sometimes it's actually more beneficial to look back as opposed to forward for some of these alternatives and alternative delivery methods.
True. I think as I remember growing up, I always visited market with our own bags, and the packaging was always paper. And this happened in my lifetime, and I'm relatively young. My next question will be to Buvivi. I think it was a specific targeted question. Keri did answer in the live chat, but it was targeted on Indonesia, specifically on the small and medium scale businesses, and mostly on single-use plastics. So I think it has brought the regulation, or the mayor's regulation in the city and in general, I think in Indonesia, maybe the big retailers or the private mini marts have been reducing the use of the single-use plastics. But still the small and medium enterprises or street vendors where a single-use plastic is go-to just because of the cheap availability of the material. Yeah. But I'm sure there would have been eco-friendly alternatives before, and not just like plastics, but other non-plastic alternatives. What is the are there any models which you know of in Semarang are successful, and what approach you will take in educating and moving these small and medium enterprises towards alternatives?
Yeah, thank you, Saurabh, for addressing the question. Actually, in one side, I can understand the way the government, why they like not to put more burdens to the small scale industries, because if they force the regulation to the small scale industry, it gives more burden for their economy. But on the other side, when you ask about the good experience, or best practice from Semarang, I think I would like to highlight the way the role of the CSR in promoting or helping leveraging the capacity of this small scale, and also at the same time educate this small scale, raising awareness on using not to use this single plastic waste, for example. So there are various types of a CSR platform in which I see that as a good innovation, rather than we depend on the regulation from the government, because especially in the current situation in the COVID, when the government need to prioritize the economic and so on, and at the same time the issue of waste becomes not the priority anymore. So I think the engagement of the private through the CSR scheme, I think is one of the promising approach that has been so far take place in many Indonesian cities, including in Semarang. That's what I can share. Thank you, Saurabh.
Thank you. And I think just one, and I will give one last question as we are running with the time, and maybe ask you all three of you to respond, and specifically maybe on your experience, and for all the attendees and participants. If you have to give one highlight from your respective fields, maybe Keri, who is funding this program, Taylor, who is working on caps on all of the cities on creating baseline, and Buvivi, who is working on implementing those tools on ground. If you have to give a brief highlight on the structure of this tool, of how, and as it was created for Urban Ocean, becoming an Urban Ocean methodology, what will be your top 2 or top 3 highlights of using this tool? And I don't want to put anyone on the spotlight, but if just smile if you're ready with this question, and maybe I will maybe first Keri, I will give it to you, and then to Taylor, and then to Buvi.
Well, obviously, I'm biased as an Urban Ocean evangelist, but I think some of the top highlights for me and implementing this program is the adaptability of it. So working with the cities so they really take ownership over the challenges and the solutions, I think will prove critical to the success longer term. Another highlight or benefit for me is sort of the people. I think that we all come from diverse backgrounds, but this partnership that we have really has proven fruitful, and I'm just excited to see what comes out of it through this first cohort, and potentially a new cohort next year. And then the third highlight for me was seeing how we could still implement the program despite the challenges of COVID-19. I know that there was a time where we just weren't sure how things were going to pan out. And so it makes me smile to see Wiwandari here, for instance, and Taylor and you talking about how this work is getting accomplished despite a lot of the challenges that we're facing in our day-to-day personal and professional lives.
And I guess I have sort of 2 highlights, and one of them sort of stems from what Keri was saying. I think, as I mentioned, one of the silver linings of COVID is that we've been able to work through local implementing partners to do the data collection. But one of the things that has made me very happy is to see those partners like Buwiwi and the others that we've worked with in the different cities really take ownership of that data and really run with it. That's the ultimate hope for the CAP, is to develop data that is useful and usable. And it's really exciting to see that. And the CAP itself being adapted to meet the needs of the cities around the world, and to be working with such an incredible and diverse group of partners to do this. And my second one is still somewhat forthcoming, but in doing some of the comparisons across the cities, it was exciting to see some of the common threads throughout. And I'm really excited for, fingers crossed, next year when we can get all of the initial cohort of learning cities and mentor cities together, because I think that one of the things that I've learned in my somewhat brief time working in waste management is that people are there are so many distinct and unique structures in place, but there are more things that cities and communities have in common than you would initially think. And I think that commonality can lead to lots of fruitful conversations and common solutions. And so I'm excited for those conversations to happen when they can.
Yeah, from my side, I forgot to mention, actually, I'm personally very excited with the mentor, because during this program, we will have the mentor cities for Semarang is Toyama, and we look forward. We have been working in some other programs with Toyama, and hope we can continue in this program. And I think this is a very good approach, in which we can maintain our network within the GRCN. Despite that, my two highlights is first related with the inclusivity. So I think it's what I like, and I think need to be keep maintained, is the way we need to ensure participation of all different stakeholders, and the way we make the stakeholder mapping and keep engage the related stakeholders, I think is one of the key success to ensure the sustainability of this program, not only at the current time, but also for the long time period. And secondly, as maybe Keri or Taylor has mentioned, and I would like to mention it again, it's about the co-benefit. I think it's very important to ensure we not only talking about environment, but somehow co-benefit with the economic issues will give a more robust concept for implementing this urban ocean program, not only in Semarang, I'm sure, but also in other cities worldwide. Yeah, I think that's all from me, Saurabh.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I will pass now to Mai to close the session. I think we did it on time, maybe much better, 5 minutes to go. So over to you and Sanjaya.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. I have to say that I have been listening to the session quite eagerly, because from our side, maybe a few highlights I can share from the external, looking into the program that you are doing, and from our background of working with cities on disaster risk management and risk reduction. It's you may be surprised or not surprised that actually waste management is one of the items that has been brought up so many times by the cities as the cause of potential, the cause of why the city is running into many disasters. And a lot of the cities have been trying to tackle basic disaster risk reduction from improving also the solid waste management and etc. And so it's very exciting to see that this approach is being brought up, and we can see the examples coming from the cities. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be very useful for many of the cities that would want to initiate a conversation structurally from the systematic perspective, working with different stakeholders in tackling the solid waste management issues. So would be very happy to take forward some of the learnings here and discuss with the cities that we are working with as well, and really looking forward for many more opportunities that may be coming in the future. And don't forget to share any learnings that you may have from the program that you are doing, because I'm sure that the learning will be beneficial to everyone. So I would like to lastly pass the floor to Sanjaya, just for the few words from his side as well. Over to you, Sanjaya.
Thank you. Thank you all. It has been very, very informative, very rich, very interesting to see this approach. And I think it would be of much use to our participants. You can see from the Q&A how active they have been. And of course, some of the questions have been answered live, but most of them have been answered through written answers. So it's been a very active group of people. Of course, this recording is going to be available on the link which has been given, and all the materials. So I hope that the participants can share this with their networks, within their networks, and also with the urban practitioners and those dealing with urban development, so that the message can be spread, that there are approaches and tools available which can help them. So with this, again, I want to thank Urban Ocean Conservancy, Resilient Cities Network, and the city of Semarang for making this happen, and for sharing all your experience and lessons. And also thank all the participants for their patience. And with that, also want to thank my UNDRR team who have been working very hard to make this series possible. And with this, we end. So wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day or evening.
Thank you. Bye.